In a previous video, I discussed the corruption crisis that's been ongoing in Guatemala, how the current Guatemalan government continues the practice of protecting corruption in Guatemala. And in this case, President Alejandro Giammattei is continuing the active agenda of firing independent judges and firing anti-corruption investigators and having them want to be intimidated into leaving Guatemala. In this video, I'm going to talk about what are the alternatives for Guatemala in terms of any hope of political change in that country. Guatemala has historically always been a very conservative, right-wing country and society. All the leaders of government have always been anti-communist leading conservatives. For most of the 20th century, Guatemala was a military dictatorship that didn't end until 1986. And even after the Civil War in Guatemala ended in 1996, the country has still been run by conservatives. And the common theme and trend I've seen examining the conservative parties of Guatemala is a lot of them tend to be led by former military officials from the Civil War era. And a lot of the agendas they have tend to be wanting to protect any military personnel from ever having to go to trial for their war crimes. They tend to be always wanting to justify a lot of the atrocities that the military did during the Civil War and downplaying it and seeking to protect all other forms of corruption in the country. And they tend to be very hostile towards the indigenous Mayan population of the country. So, in this video, I will talk about some of the small yet growing political parties, the alternative to the conservative establishment in Guatemala. Talking about parties such as Semilla and the Humanist Party in Guatemala and others. And what could they do to try to change the political status quo in Guatemala? One of the reasons I'm so interested in making a video on this is being someone of Guatemalan descent. My dad, who was an immigrant from Guatemala, as I've shared a video in the past about my background, I am obviously interested in seeing things hopefully one day improve in Guatemala, since I still have a lot of family on my dad's side in that country. One political party that I have followed on social media that's an alternative to the establishment is the Semilla Party in Guatemala. The Semilla Party was created in 2017. It was born during the protests against Otto Perez Molina in 2015, protesting against him and then he ended up resigning. The Semilla Party was created, and it was a coalition of the different activist groups who took part in these protests in 2015. Some of the prominent members of the Semilla Party are Ligia Gomez and Lucrecia Hernandez Mack. Lucrecia Hernandez Mack is a very interesting political figure in Guatemala. She is of half Chinese, half Mayan descent. Her mother was an anthropologist named Mirna Mack. Her mother was killed by the military of Guatemala in 1990 while the Civil War in Guatemala was still going on. Her mother was killed because she was an activist for the Mayan population, and the military of Guatemala, which was at the time terrorizing the Mayan population, did not like critics, and so they killed Mirna Mack. And Lucrecia Hernandez Mack was 17 at the time when her mother was killed. Lucrecia Hernandez Mack is a physician, a medical doctor, and she served as health minister of Guatemala for a year under Jimmy Morales and resigned when she saw he was very corrupt. And then in 2020, she joined Congress as part of the Semilla Party. And she's a very outspoken woman who has been wanting to end the culture of corruption and impunity in Guatemala and stand for human rights and better conditions for women in Guatemala and fighting impunity. Another woman is Ligia Gomez, a woman who is a lawyer in Guatemala and also a congresswoman now. And she's in her early 40s. And she, along with Lucrecia Hernandez Mack, are part of a minority in Guatemala's Congress that are trying to change things and the status quo. The Semilla Party has only 7 seats in Congress in Guatemala, which is why I said they are a minority and don't have enough influence to change things, unfortunately. Another alternative political party in Guatemala is called WINAC, and they are a political party representing the indigenous population of Guatemala, such as the Mayan population, who have always been underrepresented and abused in Guatemala's history, and never really in the past had much political participation. Another alternative political party out there is called the Humanist Party of Guatemala, who have also been pushing for change in Guatemala and actually pursuing anti-corruption efforts.